Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Sunday Night Breakdown. Daniel Routledge and Dave Forrester on another busy week of British Basketball League action. We go back to Wednesday night, first off, where the London Lions were taking on the Glasgow Rocks, and it finished 110-73 in favour of London. Still no Kevin Ware. We're not sure where he's got to. And the Rocks really stuck about for about 8 minutes or so, and then Lockhart hit some threes, and Ali Hodgic had 7 points, and they had 15 in a row, and out to a 12-point lead, and it was never coming back from there, really.
Yeah, it was a game for about a quarter. You're right, it was a game for about a quarter. And the difficulty Glasgow have is that they are in demand. They have 7 players, but they've lost a lot of athleticism in Keeling and Delph, a lot of quickness, and that leaves them probably significantly mismatched against most teams, but even more significantly mismatched against London because of London's depth, London's length, and London's shooting. And the other thing that Glasgow have not done well all season, possibly due to that lack of quickness and therefore their inability to recover, is to defend the three-point line. So they've tended to let teams bomb away and try and keep the structural integrity of their defense by not overcommitting and not running people off and not getting beat.
Yeah,
that means that
the one team you don't want to do that to is London.
It is London, and when they get into a rhythm, they've got shooters who can shoot from the triple threat position, who can catch the basketball, and if there's a man in front of them, it doesn't matter. They're still going to make it. You've got to be more than in front of them. You've got to be up right into them. You've got to prevent them getting into their shooting motion. And unfortunately, once they wore down a little bit, their bench unit, they have Quady and Malcolm coming off the bench. And if anything, they get even a little bit slower with Quady and Malcolm because they lose Van Sowers and Brandon, who are probably the two of the quicker guys off the dribble. And at that point, it just becomes kind of one of those rec games whereby everybody's shooting in and London are just making more than Glasgow and getting some run outs, and the game is done, and everybody knows the game is done, but everyone's got to play out the second half.
Yeah, Quady hit 3 threes. They cut it to 5 at one point in the second quarter, but then Liggins and Williams 9-0 finish to the first half, 10-0 start to the third quarter, 61-37, and as you say, the clock couldn't tick quick enough after that. Liggins with 30.7 assists, 6 of 13. That was his best game by index. He had a 36 index in 27 minutes.
He's a perfect example of that guy who can just shoot the ball if you're not in front of him. If you're in front of him, it doesn't matter. If you're not right up into him and challenging him, he can shoot the ball. And Glasgow, no one who can do that. They just don't have a physical specimen who can do that without compromising the entire integrity of their defense and giving up layups and dunks and open threes everywhere else. And so he probably enjoyed it as kind of a get my eye in type of night.
Yeah. 16 and 12 for Brandon was the lead for the Rocks. Rocks mathematically out of the playoff race. There's no combination of results that can get them over the line. So to Worcester 57, Leicester 75. Still no Anderson for the Wolves. And Leicester really struggled to score early on in this game. Parks had 6 points for the Wolves, and they opened out a 17-8 lead, keeping Leicester basically to a point a minute for the first 7.5, 8 minutes.
It was an intriguing game because, obviously this team's have a little bit of history. There's been 2 last shot games between them fairly recently. Both of them, Anderson was a significant part of. And the ability he gave them to have that third penetrating guard to challenge the integrity of Leicester's defense was critical. And it was interesting for me because of the moves that were made during the game, and particularly early on in the game. And there's a different way you coach when you're head down for the line in relation to winning the title to the way you would coach if you were 15 and 15 if you were mid-table and you knew you were going to be in the playoffs. And Leicester struggled at the beginning. Crandall didn't start, so they had that kind of issue with their half-court offense where they don't quite have the same ability to get the ball into Nelson Henry without Crandall on the court. And they relied on kind of late shot clock stuff and Heron to shoot the ball off the dribble. And the problem is with Heron is that he's a shot maker, but he has every shot. And sometimes he shoots ones that the coach wouldn't, I think, be very keen on him shooting. Maybe the best option they get, but in effect, it kind of throws their system off. And think he must have shot 6 or 7 shots in the first 6 minutes, and he made a couple of them. You know, they weren't bad plays, but you know, it wasn't the way that they normally start. And at the other end, they couldn't handle Jordan Williams, and Worcester ran the game through Jordan Williams. So about 4 minutes to go in the first quarter, about probably actually the 5.5-minute mark in the first quarter, I think Mo Walker came in for 2 minutes.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And that was interesting because obviously he came in ahead of Fraser, and he also isn't in their system at the moment because he's not been playing. And for about 3 consecutive possessions, they force-fed him the ball, which is what you do when you've got Mo Walker, because he's a dominant post player. So, you know, he's posting up there. You've got to give him the ball. But he wasn't able to finish in the paint. The spacing.
They were 3 very Mo Walker shots, but they normally go in, those ones, and they didn't.
Well, he's not on the rhythm yet. And what that does is that changes their spacing as well, because it's a different type of post up to the kind of the 2-man game with Nelson Henry. So what then happened was, for the first time I can remember in probably 8 years, Fraser came in with Walker. And for the first time, remember,
full disclosure, my son was at football training, and I was sat in the car watching this game on my laptop in the car, and he came on, and I thought, I bet Dave's going to talk about that on Sunday.
Well, yeah, it was amazing because, you know, for the last 7 years, Leicester's identity has been the one everybody can shoot from the 3-point line, apart from maybe the one big guy who starts. And it used to be, Tomo used to come off the bench and be the stretch 5. He was never a 4. And suddenly Fraser and Walker on the court together, and neither of them really got range outside of about 18 feet. And the first possession, actually the only possession, was a mess. You know, they got the ball down, I think the ball Fraser down low more. There was no spacing. They turned it over trying to thread the needle. And it was 1 possession. That was it. But Walker came out never to return. And it just struck me as to the way that you coach in games where you know that the league is on the line is you don't have time. You have to be utterly decisive, you know. And I understand why he tried, but he saw why Rob tried. But he showed 1 possession. That was it. He was like, no, this is not the way we do things. I'm not, just because I've got these players doesn't mean I'm going to gerrymander them into getting minutes to keep them happy. You can't be doing that. And then the second step that made a massive difference in the game was Jamal Anderson, because Jamal Anderson came in and guarded Jordan Williams, and they had a very, very sound structure for guarding Jordan Williams. You know, he would get the ball in the post, but they were generally forcing him to the middle where there was help. Trying not to foul him, but being physical with him, not letting
the guard biting down on him as well.
Yeah, the guard biting down. Crandall is exceptional at that. Crandall is probably the best guard in the league at biting down, clearing the space away. It's why he gets so many rebounds, and packing the paint, but also not giving up the kick out. You know, he dares them to kick the ball out to his man, because he's really good at that. And so they ended up defending him with a really physical, solid defender in Jamal Anderson, with a structure which was, we're not going to let him go baseline because then you can't help. It's very difficult to help. And we're going to have everybody digging down on him. And that turned the basketball game. It wasn't about their offense. It was about the fact that, you know, they shut Leicester, they shut Worcester down in the second quarter.
Yeah, there was a 10-minute spell from the end of the first quarter to the 2 minutes to go to halftime, where Wolves only scored 8 points. And in that time, fouls on Crandall, Nelson Henry, Leicester just sort of eased away out to 35-24 it was, with a couple minutes to go.
And the brutal thing, and this is why, you know, coaching for a championship is brutal, because he changed the starting line at the beginning of the third quarter as well. And Heron didn't start. So Jamal Anderson started. They've got a little offense-defense thing going with Heron and Anderson at the moment. But the Leicester coaching staff figured out that the game was on Jordan Williams. That if they made it hard for Jordan Williams and he couldn't score comfortably, that the Worcester guards did not have enough juice to play 40 minutes without Anderson and create enough stuff against them to beat them. They had to get stuff to Jordan Williams. And Jamal Anderson, I won't say he shut him down, because no one can shut him down, but he did the luxury, I've talked about it before, the luxury of having a player who is your maybe your 4th or 5th scoring option, but is capable of shutting down the opposition's number 1, is just, you know, it's an absolute boon for a coach. It's awesome because you don't have to worry about what's happening at the other end, but you do know that he's going to concentrate fully and spend much of his energy on doing the job that the team needs the most to win, which is affecting Jordan Williams, preventing him from becoming a willing passer and stopping him getting layups at the rim. And so Heron didn't actually come back in the game until about the 3-minute mark in the third quarter. He'd sat out a long time, and he then comes in and gives them a boost in relation to his energy because he's ready to play and he's a scorer, and you can always use a scorer at any point in the game. But it was Anderson's minutes which separated the game, which made that a game which the other guys could then come in and finish out. And the difficulty Worcester had and the difficulty Matt Newby had in that game was that when you're playing a team who's going for a championship, you're playing at a different level. It's a different level of basketball. It's like we see in the finals, but at the moment, Leicester are playing every game like it's a final because they want this league won and they want it won as quick as they can. And so they're playing at a high level. And Worcester only had probably 4, maybe 5 players who were ready to play at that level because they got nothing from McSwiggan. Wilkins didn't want to shoot the ball. I don't think he was 0 of 3, but he turned down some open looks. Elan played very, very sparingly. So he's left with Parks, Williams, Burns, Kimball, and Bowneck. But you can't play those 5 together because you can't play Burns, Williams, and Parks together because they're too big. And when he tried to, and ultimately when he ended up trying to play Jordan Williams and Mike Parks together, Leicester destroyed them because the spacing wasn't there. They were getting no scoring at the other end. Leicester are doing a better job this year than I've ever seen them of packing the paint defensively. In the past, that you felt that if you got past the first guy, you would get a layup. Now it's not that. It's probably because Nelson Henry is a very, very smart player. William Lee is a natural rim protector. So those 2 things have really helped them. And Crandall is just Crandall digging around everywhere. And playing with the 2 bigs against Leicester, I think is death. I'm not sure you can do it. I just don't think you can do it the way they're defending. And then they get out and run. And at that point, the game was over. So it was a slow kind of strangulation of the basketball game. But that's the way you win games on the road when you're going for the league. And you have to do it without any degree of remorse or without any degree of caring about your own players. Heron didn't do anything wrong. He shot the shots. He shot a couple of shots. Maybe he might not have shot, but he's not back in the game until towards the end of the third quarter. It's about what you need. And it's all right having all those resources, but if you don't know how to use them, they're not worth it. And Rob used them really, really well in that game.
So 14 minutes to go, it's 46-48. 7 minutes later, it was 46-64. Leicester scored 16 points in a row, and that was
just grinding them down.
Yeah. The interesting thing in the numbers at the end of it is Leicester's top scorer was Nelson Henry with 14 and Crandall with 12. And then they had like 6 guys who all had sort of 6 or 8 points. And it was sort of like everybody chipping something in.
Yeah, it's all about, and it's in the lineups as well. It really kind of depends on who's on court. But look, they have 8 BBL starters, maybe 9. We haven't probably seen quite enough about fouls on, but what I have seen, he's probably pretty close to a BBL starter. So they have 9 BBL starters, so everybody should be scoring the basketball when they're in the game. There's nobody you look at on the Leicester roster and think, okay, I'm happy he's on the court. We can leave him and we can start maybe helping off in other ways. That's what makes them so difficult to defend.
Let's go to Plymouth then. Plymouth Raiders 74, Bristol Flyers 65. Very low scoring in the first quarter. They were basically trading scores. It was 14 all at the end of the quarter, and then Lockett and Wiltshire both hitting from behind the arc, and Bristol edged in front, sort of 6 or 7 points for most of that quarter. End up 5 points at halftime.
It was a brutal first quarter. It was a brutal first quarter to watch. I got the impression from it that obviously eBay's still not playing for Plymouth. And Bristol at times struggle to score the ball anyway. That's their major problem. What I took from it was that, Plymouth I thought was starting to maybe just show the impact of the intensity that they've been playing at in relation to their energy levels. For the first time, it looked like the game, it was a little bit of a drag. The game, there was nothing coming particularly easy for anybody. Obviously, Bristol tend to get the game physical anyway, but Plymouth are probably even more physical than Bristol. So you can't really take too much from that. And I just got the impression, and I don't, to be blunt, I can't remember much of the particular intricacies of the lineups because everybody played quite a lot from what, and both teams kind of moved players in and out quite regularly. But you just got the impression that you were waiting for Plymouth just to put their foot down a little bit of physicality, and also McGill is the most dynamic and explosive guard on the court, and you were kind of waiting for him to step up, and it probably took until Dusha came in the game in the third quarter for that to happen. I think.
Well, there really wasn't much in the first quarter, and they did have an 8-0 run to get the lead in the third quarter, Plymouth, but Flyers came back with 7 straight to lead 40-47, and with 8 to go, the Flyers still led by 4, but then that was the moment that they kind of flipped the switch there. Plymouth. Hamilton had 7. They got 14-3 run, and suddenly from being 4 points down, they're 7 points up and looking on course for the next win.
Yeah, and I think they just have more scorers than Bristol. This is I'm still not sure what it is. This point of the season, you would expect to know as a coach what is your primary defensive lineup and what is your primary offensive lineup. So who do I, depending on what I need, what am I looking at? Who am I going to finish games with? Basically, what lineups do I want in the court to finish games? I still don't know with Bristol. They obviously they're playing without Mockford, which kind of leaves them with not really much option at the guard other than Wilshire and Teddy. And
Teddy played 40 minutes in this game.
Teddy played 40 minutes, which is always going to be hard against a team like Plymouth. And then in the front court, it's a mixture of Edozie, Delpeche, Thomas Edwards, Rogers, Baker, and they're all having their moments. But no one is kind of put their hands up to say, look, I'm the guy who you need to have in the game at the end, and I'm the guy who's going to make the plays. And I think they lose out a little bit on that. They also they don't really best use Wilshire's specific abilities in relation to the pick and roll. When Wilshire, for instance, it's an easy example because only a couple of years ago when he was down at Plymouth with Hassan, Wilshire and Hassan in the pick and roll were a nightmare to guard. Because you space the court, the two of them. The one is the archetypal quick little point guard, and the other is the role man and the finisher. And it was as close to, maybe there was Pryor and Fraser last year were very good at Glasgow, but Pryor and Fraser, Wilshire and Hassan were probably the two best pick and roll combos we've got. They don't really have that big guy. They have a little bit from Delpeche, but he also posts up. They have a little bit from Edozie, but he primarily kind of floats around 15 feet. And Baker is kind of the stretch 4 who shoots the 3. And I just don't know what their best lineup is, and I think that's a problem for them. It remains a problem for them.
Yeah. Let's move on to Friday night. Sheffield Sharks 88, Surrey Scorchers 59, and this one really got away pretty early. Lillard attacking, got 7 in a row to a 7-point lead, and Nichols and Lillard hit some threes, and it's out to 28-16. And to be honest with you, there was almost no response from Surrey.
2 things about this game. Firstly, I'd like to say it was eminently predictable, but I didn't put any money on it.
So it wasn't that predictable.
I can't claim that. Yeah. Looking, if you were looking back on it, and if I'd thought about it more deeply before the game, perhaps I would have. Surrey were coming off a 20-point win against Newcastle. It's probably their best win in a year or 2. Sheffield have come off a couple of relatively disappointing losses. Sheffield have a long and proud history of responding to disappointing losses at home by blowing somebody out, normally a lower team. Surrey have not shown anything like the consistency to demonstrate that they're able to kind of put a run of games together. And whether people admit it or not, the BBL bounce back is a legitimate phenomenon, both ways. The pressure, the urgency, particularly in a season like this where the games are concertina together, the pressure and the urgency of a game where you've lost 2 in a row and you're playing at home against a lower team, against a team who's quite happy, quite comfortable that they've just won by 20 and think everything is going perfectly for them. And it doesn't take much. It's not like saying Surrey just turn up without caring and think they're going to walk in and win. They don't. But all it takes is that 10%, that little bit of focus, that little bit of self-satisfaction. It happens with basically every team. It was the biggest thing, the biggest issue that we always had to focus on when I was at Newcastle was, forget this thing about momentum. It's not, the momentum stops when it's 0-0 and the ball's being thrown up the next game. You've got to earn the right the next game to win the next game. It's not about the last game. It's not about how good you feel. You've got to start all over again. And Surrey didn't. Now you throw in on top of that Ponds Forge is not an easy place to shoot the basketball. The dynamics of the arena, the perspective, it's a bit of depth at the ends and the top is flat. And we lost a game there last year, I think, where Sheffield shot 1 of 23 from the 3-point line. And that's the home team. I wasn't very happy. We were disappointed that we didn't shoot much better. They shot 1 of 23, and Surrey shot 3 of 23. And
2 of 23. I've got
2 of 23. Beg your pardon. And you're not going to win a game on the road shooting that. So I think it's one of those games whereby eventually you've got to keep shooting the shots. But if you don't make them, then eventually, after about kind of halfway through the third quarter, you kind of figure out there's no way back.
No,
and there wasn't.
Well, it got to 20 early in the third and never got back under 20. Lillard with 24 points and 10 rebounds, 9 of 16 shooting. Hicks with 21 points. Nobody else in double figures. And as you say, they're terrible from the 3-point line. 24 of 60 overall. Let's move on to Newcastle. Newcastle 91, Manchester Giants 95. And this game was pretty close until Fletch has 9 in a 13-2 run around the first break, and Newcastle out to a 28-21 lead, and Fletcher was just scoring all over the place in the first half. 23 points he had, and they were in total control of this game in the first half.
Yeah, I was in the arena for this game, so I kind of got a good look. I was sat behind above the Manchester bench, and obviously Manchester without Hudson as well, so they were down to basically a 7-man rotation. Newcastle were all healthy, albeit they only played 7. I just talked about the BBL bounce back. Well, that game that Newcastle lost by 20 at Surrey struck a chord with Ramon Fletcher. And that was clear in his purpose from the beginning, and he put on a superlative show, it wasn't forced, he wasn't chucking at bad shots, it was just comfortable, it was attacking in every which way, and he just demonstrated an ability to score the ball that few people in the league have. But the first half, but this game was actually amazingly, despite the fact he ended up with nearly 40, this game wasn't actually about him. It wasn't anything to do with the Eagles' offense. It was to do with the defense of both teams. And in the first half, Newcastle held Manchester at 32. Cassell got nothing. Cassell was draped. He had a couple of tough shots. We all know Sam Cassell can score the ball. We know how he wants to score the ball, and he got nothing. And Manchester shot the ball very poorly. They were 1 of 14, but they didn't get many open looks. They were being challenged. They were going to need to make some threes because, to be blunt, that without they probably don't, with only Ulf in the middle, it's a struggle to see them getting to the rim a lot. And they didn't make threes, and they were held to 32 points. And no doubt, whilst some of the Newcastle offensive players weren't kind of going, they went into halftime feeling pretty good. The third and the fourth quarter, it's been a bit of a recurring theme at the arena this year. Their defense was nowhere near where it has to be. It gave up 28 in the third quarter and 35 in the fourth quarter. Now they're just numbers, but it became clear the very first play of the third quarter. Cassell had the ball on the right-hand side at the top, and they ran their basic high screen with Cassell coming off to his left. he came off to his left into his spot. Edwards had struggled to get over the screen. Maxwell, for some reason, just disappeared back into the paint. I left him with a standstill open 3-point jump shot, and he made it. And from that moment on, the rhythm of the game changed, and the Giants got into rhythm and got comfortable scoring the ball. And the only way you can lose to Manchester is in a scoring race. And Newcastle got into a scoring race with them. Manchester came back at the middle of the third quarter. I'm sorry, I was there, so I'll take you through.
No, that's fine.
Manchester came back at the middle of the third quarter, and then Eagles brought Defoe in off the bench, and Defoe really made a difference because he was the one who took the physical challenge. He solidified their defense, and the Eagles went off on a run at the end of the third quarter to break it out to 15, which was basically on the back of him taking the physical challenge with Ulf and with Johnson. We had various technicals thrown in, lots of chippiness. It was quite good fun to watch. There's balls flying around and people cursing and all sorts of stuff. But
of course, you can hear it all now. That's the other thing. No background noise.
And then right on the corner of the third quarter buzzer, refs called a double technical on, I think it was Defoe and Andy. It was definitely Defoe and somebody. And that was Defoe's fourth foul. And at that point, Eagles sat him down, and beginning of the fourth quarter, Giants basically penetrated and scored the ball at will. I think they scored the first 4 possessions of the fourth quarter. They got whatever they wanted. Uwande came up, and Gordon went under his screen, and he knocked down a 3. Ulf was attacking Maxwell with vigor and scoring around the rim. And basically, the Eagles went cold at the other end, primarily because Fletcher had already scored 36 and was probably waiting for somebody else at that point to do it. Now, credit to Lloyd Gardner, because what he did, and what he spent was the whole game looking for a 5 that worked. And in the theory, you're down by 15 and you think we need scoring, so you think Jordan Whelan would be on the court and Donovan Johnson would be on the court, and they weren't, because what he figured out, I assume what he figured out, was that they needed defense. So he put Zach Powell on the court to guard Fletcher, and the rest of the team also. I don't think Zach Powell stopped Fletcher on his own; he didn't. But the rest of the team sagged in a lot more and was playing a lot more competitive health defense, and that lineup with Powell, Uwande, Cassell, Ulf, and Satchel basically dragged them back in the game. And by the time that the Eagles, Defoe came back in the game about the 6-minute mark, but he committed a foul about 2 minutes later, and the momentum had gone, and the game was on. And at that point, it was who's going to make the plays at the end, and I'll get to that in a minute.
So the Giants had a 19-2 run to start the fourth quarter. Sorry, a 6-minute spell, only a Fluger score in that time. They took the lead 79-77, and then Edwards scored, and then there was another 6 in a row. So it's 79-85.
25-4.
And then you've got let's spin it to the last couple of plays. You've got the Gordon hits the 3 to make it 86-87 to the Giants, and then they come down
off there. And Lloyd called a timeout, I think, and there's maybe 50 seconds left in the game, something like that. And they run the same play that they ran at the beginning of the third quarter, which I talked about, Cassell coming off the screen to his right, all setting the screen. And I watched this back about 4 times, and my jaw was just dropping as I was watching it, because Cassell comes round the screen to his left. Edwards runs smack bang into the screen. It's good. What you need is your big guy at that point to be out buying some help for Edwards to get it so he can get around the screen. Maxwell is stood literally guarding Ulf. He's stood facing Ulf. Doesn't step to the side at all. Doesn't do anything to impede Cassell at all. It's almost bear hugging Ulf. Which can't be in their scout. It isn't what I don't know what he was doing. I don't know. It's not their scouting report. It's not the way they did it the rest of the game when they were hedging high. He just stood there. Edwards has to force himself to get around there, so he's late. So as Cassell's rising up, he's still lunging towards him. He makes very slight contact, was a foul, and Cassell knocks down the 3.
It's that landing. It's that landing space. Foul,
yeah, well, it was a foul.
It actually looked to me, and I haven't watched it back as many times as you have, but it actually looked to me almost like Maxwell was on the other team. You know what I mean? He was like he was trying to screen him through or something. There was no movement to allow his teammate through.
Well, you wouldn't be going under the screen on Edwards anyway, but on Cassell anyway, I don't think. But Edwards couldn't have gone to the screen anyway because Maxwell was still there. He just did not move. He just literally stood guarding Oaf 30 feet from the basket when Oaf has not got the ball. Yeah. Well, you just can't do that, you know. And when you get to massive plays in games, which win games and ultimately affect your record in the standings and affect whether you win leagues and whether you win championships or not, those are plays that matter. Yeah. You know, that's anybody's game. It's a 1-point game. Yeah. You ended up giving a rhythm shooter, a guy who's already got about 15 points in the second half because he hasn't been guarded particularly well, a perfect look and a 4-point play, which meant that even though they scored every time down from that moment on, they couldn't get back because Manchester made foul shots.
Yeah. You know? So he makes that 4-point play. It's 86-91. There's 36 seconds to go. And I thought it was dumb foul down the other end that gave Maxwell an and-1 to cut it to 2. But as you say, the Giants made their foul shot. Got into a foul game, and Giants made both free throws on both trips.
And a lot of players on the Newcastle team really need to look at Ramon Fletcher in the eye and apologise. Yeah. Because he not only did he have 38 points, he had 9 assists. He didn't force anything. It wasn't
like he was career high for points.
Yeah, it wasn't like give me the ball every time down. You know, but he scored or created 58 of their 91 points.
Yeah, that's 15 crazy. Of 22 shooting.
From 14 of 22.
15 of 22. You know,
15 of 22. That's just it's crazy. And for them not to win that basketball game when he's put in a game like that, you know, there are some guys in that locker room who need to be looking very carefully at each other.
So I actually looked it up this morning because obviously they were 15 up going into the fourth quarter, and I've got quarter scores going back to 2009, and Newcastle have never lost a game from that position before, up 15. The highest I could find was December 2011 when they led 64-51 but against the Wolves, but lost the fourth quarter 16-43.
Yeah, and that was the Tommy Freeman game.
Yeah.
Tommy Freeman went off for 25 points in that game, and I remember it happening in front of my eyes. I'm sure Bridgie will remember it as well if he watches this. Tommy Freeman had.
Also in that time, there was only one other double figure game, which was Sheffield, October 2019, up 12 and ended up losing by 3.
You know, you say that, but you know, having sat through and probably been present at nearly every single one of those games, I would tell you that's happened more than what I would have told you that about 10 times. Yeah. Because the mentality when you're sitting on the bench is that it's always going to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the fact that you've told me that, I mean, the Sheffield game I don't remember, but the
it's Cup game. It's Cup game in October 19. I don't remember what round
Cup group game. It was a group game. I wouldn't remember. But the Worcester game is syringed.
Yeah. And Eagles officially out of the title race on that defeat.
Well, officially, but I think they were well out of it a little bit before then.
Let's go to Worcester now. Worcester Wolves 83, Cheshire Phoenix 76. Ross back in the team, back in the starting lineup. A first start since he joined Cheshire for Matthew Brown Manning. So they were bringing Carey and Gordon off the bench, and then they scored the first 8 points, but Wolves finished the last 2 minutes of the opening quarter with a 11-2, and it's a 2-point game at the end of the first period.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out Cheshire because obviously they've got some moving parts with all the changes they've made and with the injuries that they've had. And it appears that they started the two bigs this time to match up with Parks and Williams. That's what I'm thinking, because that's not something that they've done for the rest of the season. And what it meant was that Hayes drops to the 3. Now Hayes, in the first 4 or 5 minutes of the game, Hayes marmalised McSwiggan. He's just too physically big for him. He took him down in the post, too athletic, and he scored. And I think they got that 8-0 run or that 6-0 run. They got points at the rim, and they scored quite comfortably at the rim. That is, however, a double-edged sword, because that meant that the guards weren't necessarily in the rhythm of the game. What they did, I thought, particularly well. They had given it some thought, because you think, how can Hayes get to the rim when you've got Matthew Bryan and Amling and Jimbo Lull also in the game? Well, they pulled Jimbo Lull way out. He was almost playing at the stretch. He was playing as a stretch four at the top of the key. Spent most of his time on the 3-point line, and they used that to create the space for either Bryan Amling or early on Hayes, because Hayes had the mismatch to go down low and score. But as I say, that is kind of fool's gold, because what happens is you score early in the post, but everybody's standing watching the guy who's scoring. And that isn't a matchup that you're going to be going to throughout, because your lineups are going to change, and Hayes is going to move to the 4, and he's going to end up being guarded by Williams or Burns or someone like that. And I thought that what happened was Worcester bounced back, because when Cheshire's bench came in and they had to play an entirely different way, the guards weren't in the flow of the game. So, in any event, it was still Ross's first game back, so you wouldn't expect him to be in the flow of the game. But McCall really wasn't in the flow of the game. And then Worcester got going again, missing Anderson, but then they started getting some play from their kind of supplementary parts as well, and started getting some scoring from then. And Elan came in and gave them a little bit, and Baunecht and Kimball have been very, very consistent throughout. So they Cheshire went from a very big lineup to probably the smallest lineup they can put out. And I'm still kind of figuring out what is their, just like Bristol, what is their preferred lineup at both at the beginning and the end of games. How do they best mesh? And I'm not sure they know yet either.
Well, Hayes, Ross, and NBA helped the Knicks back in front, and then the third quarter, it was really sort of one to two baskets between them through, until Boutnet hit a 3 and Wilkins hit a couple of threes early in the fourth quarter, and it got the Wolves in front. And even though it was never out of reach, it felt relatively comfortable in the last 4 or 5 minutes.
Did. And Wilkins was a big part of this, because I think he made 4 threes in this game. And they're the shots that he wasn't shooting against Leicester. He wasn't. Now there's potentially 2 reasons for that. One, Leicester guys are a bit longer, a little bit more closer to you, a little bit in your face, so you're less comfortable shooting it. Or 2, you're just not in the moment when you're playing the game. And maybe Matt Newby told him that. Next to him, look, if you're going to be in a game, you are a shooter, you're 6'3", you've got to shoot the ball. If you miss, but you have to be positive and you have to be aggressive. And those 12 points that they get from him at key parts of the game, and I think they got a little contribution from Elan as well, were really interesting. But the interesting thing about down the stretch of this game, I thought, was the way that Matt Newby sat down Kimball and put Okiki in the game. And Tola Okiki hadn't really played. I think he only played 5 minutes in the game. But those 5 minutes came at the end, and he put him on with the specific purpose of guarding Mike McCall. And Tola Okiki, the freshness of him and an exceptional attitude not to play and then to come in. He harassed McCall for the last 3 or 4 minutes. And McCall is a guy who can take a game away from you in a second. And he harassed him, and for Matt Newby to keep him on the court at that point, when his American scoring guard, who you'd normally have at the end, isn't on the court, and to trust the defense to win the game, I thought was impressive. I was waiting for him to. I was waiting for him just to be put him back in, and he never did. And that was right, because ultimately, at the end of the games, it's not about who can score; it's about who can get stops. And more importantly, it's about taking away the guy that the opposition want to shoot the ball and want to have the ball in their hands from making plays. Now, Newcastle didn't do that with Cassell and Nwandi. What Worcester did with Cheshire was that they did that. They took McCall out of the basketball game. They challenged Ross, who hadn't played a game in 4 weeks, and the big guys to make plays. And the big guys have been banging around all game. It's hard. You need your guards to get cheap foul shots at the end, and they weren't able to manage it. So a nice little move there, I thought, to put Okiki in the game.
Backnet 18, 7 and 10. An impressive
Baunecht is having a massively underrated. I say underrated. We don't talk about him much. No. I don't think he's underrated by the people who know. He's shooting something like 48% from 3. He's he's leading the team in various different ways. He's playing with such confidence. His pull-up jump shot is infinitesimally better than it was last year. He's able to finish at the rim with both hands. And he's gone from being kind of a third guard last year to being the leader of that team. And I don't know if it's because of familiarity. I don't know if it's because of skill improvement. It may just be the familiarity with the concepts and everything that's going on. But he's in line for. If we had 3 All BBL teams, he'd be in one of my 3 All BBL teams.
Yeah, I think also, and this might be sort of like stereotyping all Europeans together, but he's sort of opened up from a traditional European point guard to a more BBL style point guard.
He hasn't. I mean, we saw him the very first game he played last year. The very first game he played in England was a friendly game in Newcastle at Sports Centre. I think it might even been at Sports Central. Oh, it wasn't. It was at the arena, but it was in one of the side courts. And they came up, and you're always looking at who the new guys are. And Worcester didn't have a couple of Americans, so it was only a few of them. And Bowneck was one of them. And my initial view on him was, he's solid, but he doesn't really look like he wants to shoot the ball. Not quite he doesn't look comfortable in making the plays that lead guards would normally do in the BBL. What it appears was it's a question of familiarity as opposed to skill set.
Yeah.
Because the skill set he's shown this year, with the leash off a little bit, he's a seriously high level guard for this league.
Let's go to the Saturday games. Leicester Riders 93, Plymouth Raiders 85 after overtime. And Heron and Washington hit threes early on for Leicester. They opened up a 9-2 lead. Raiders were airball, side of the board, all sorts of crazy stuff. But that was almost the story of the game. Leicester would get out to 7 or 8 points. Plymouth would close it back. So given, I think we'll spend a bit of time on it. I almost wanted, unless you've got something you wanted to pick up on the quarters 1 to 3.5 sort of thing, I almost want to spin it through to the end of the game.
A couple of things really. One, Plymouth weren't ready to play. I mean, the first quarter, you talk about air balls and stuff like that don't happen by chance. It's because you're mentally you're not focused. But more than that, defensively as well, they were giving up open threes. They weren't rotating out. Again, no eBay, so that's 3 games Leicester played Plymouth this year, and eBay's not played in any of them.
No.
And those are little things that can make a difference when you're looking at difference between 4 losses and 5 losses, as well. Game kind of turned a little bit in the end of the first quarter because Crandall came in the game, but he got hit hard by Dusha on the drive. And he chucked up a couple of foul shots like he didn't want to shoot the ball, to be honest. Yeah. He was holding his hand, and it's clearly his hand is not 100%. I think you'd put it that way. But if it's a soft tissue injury, it's going to be fine unless it gets hit. Yeah. And I thought for the first half, Plymouth had just about the best scheme for defending Crandall that I've seen. They went under all the screens. They packed the lane. They let him kind of dribble a ball and looking for a space. But it provided that the rest of the guys stay solid, and you kind of invite him into that kind of area about 8-10 feet from the basket, and suddenly you've got 2 or 3 guys around him, and there's no little crevices for him to squeeze through. And that, I think, combined with his hand, I think probably he didn't look particularly comfortable in the first half. So that helped Leicester, that helped Plymouth keep it close. But ultimately, they couldn't make a shot. So the fact that they were down by 4 at half time, having not made a shot, gave them every chance. And I actually thought that they would win the game simply because they'd managed to stay close. They were killing Leicester on the boards.
Offensive rebounds.
Yeah. And they had too many good shooters not to start making shots. And the way the basketball is, Leicester's guys will have known that they weren't making shots. So if a team is 1-14 or like Plymouth were, and I think Manchester were when they played Newcastle, the defense in the second half at the 3-point line will not quite be the same level it was at the beginning of the game. It's almost subconscious. You're not going to keep chasing around the guys who haven't shown that they can make a shot. You don't want to compromise the integrity of your defense.
I think you want their first 10 3-pointers.
Yeah, you want them to prove that they can make a shot. And I thought at half time, I thought Plymouth would win because I thought Plymouth would make shots eventually. And by the time Leicester figured it out, it would be too late. But I didn't figure that Crandall would get better insofar as the way he played the game and probably his health.
Yeah.
And I didn't figure that Plymouth would blow the game in the last 35 seconds.
Yeah. So let's go to the fourth quarter. Marcel hits a 3 that gets Plymouth in front for basically the first time. I think they led 2-0 or something at the beginning. with 6 to play, and then Neighbour hits one with 4 minutes to go, and they're up 4. Leicester then score the next 6 points to make it 72-70 with 1:40 to go. Morcell again hits another wing 3. He shot the ball really well in the fourth quarter. Porter Bunton airballs a free throw and then makes the second one, and then Leicester turn the ball over. It was Crandall going in, ends up on the floor. Morcell with a very difficult. It couldn't have been Crandall because Crandall was challenging the shot. My mistake. But Morcell with a very difficult score, and as you say, 37 seconds to go or whatever it was, up 4. Leicester with the timeout. That's Plymouth's game from there.
Well, it could be. I mean, it's still not, as you see, you pointed out in the commentary, they got to score quickly and then they can play defense so they can still play, so they're not into the foul shot game. But when you're playing, that's a high level game. Teams 1 and 2 in the league. Yeah. And you see that in the rosters. You see, Plymouth, however deep they are, they didn't play many players. Yeah. They went. Ocharobia played 13 minutes. McGill played the whole game and overtime. Yeah. They went with the Hamilton, Neighbour, 4
Hamilton
5.
played 37 minutes coming off the bench.
Off the bench, so that was because they were behind. And when you're behind 6 or 7 at Leicester, what PJ is thinking is, I cannot let this game get out to 12 or 13 because there might be no coming back. So because of that, he's having to play those guys those extra minutes to keep them in the basketball game. He's not, it's the flow of the game. You're not letting that happen. But Plymouth never quite. And what part of the problem Plymouth had in the first half was that Dusha got 2 fouls early, and Dusha he's certainly one of their top 6. And I think, having watched this game, he's probably one of their top 5, because I thought at the end of the game, they had 4 guys who were locked in. At the end of regular time, at the end of the last 5 minutes, I think there were 4 guys who were locked in, which was McGill, Neighbour, Hamilton, and Morcell. And I thought Porter Bunton wasn't ready. And the reason I say that was 3 minutes to go, up 4. He blew a layup. He airballed a layup, drove to the rim. That was up 6. That would have been a timeout for Leicester. That would have been a significant moment in the game. Leicester come back and score. It's a one-shot game again. Then the airball free throw, which for a big guy, okay, but for a shooting guard, a minute to go in the game, you can't, that's not physical, that's mental, right? And then the ultimate thing which cost them the basketball game, whichever way you look at it, if this doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Leicester call the timeout. I think quite sensibly, they don't advance the ball. You want to give Crandall as much runway as you can. You create the space. So they roll the ball out to Crandall. Crandall does what again? You try to maintain seconds because you got to get your shot off before 27 or 28, really. Yeah. So he doesn't touch the basketball. I think it's 34, 35 seconds. He doesn't touch the basketball. And Porter Bunton, I don't know if he was late out of the huddle or didn't realize that Crandall was up there. For some reason, he goes out and he sprints to him. Yeah. It's almost kind of to make the kind of the macho defensive play. I'm up in your face. I'm going to guard you. All this stuff. Well, Crandall must have thought that is every prayer, every dream had come at once, because he takes one look at this guy herring towards him, and he goes straight into zoom speed.
Because he looked like he was going to go super slow on it, and then he was just like attack.
Well, and he attacked because he saw the way the guy was coming. Yeah. And this is what Crandall does ever so well. He is so. His feel for the game, his feel for the spaces in the game, his feel for the speed of the defender and for the way people are defending him, because we talked about this, the guy is controlling a game when he's shooting 28% from the 3-point line, and that should be something which prevents you from doing that, because there's ways of defending that. But his feel for everything was demonstrated by that. And Porter Bunton, they had their flakiest defender sprinting out at him, meaning that within 1 second of Crandall touching the ball, that was a 5-on-4 situation with Crandall flying downhill, and all the other guys on Plymouth thinking, what do I do? 3 seconds later, it's too late. The ball's in the basket. So,
and you couldn't get a better outcome coming out of that timeout. Rob didn't draw that up, but whatever he drew up would not have been a better outcome than losing 4 seconds off the clock and scoring.
No, and it comes because of the way he was defended. No other reason. His ability to improvise, having seen that. But it's the way he was defended. And, you have to be, the defense has, the first thing you're saying if you're PJ is be solid.
Yeah.
Be solid. You know, if Crandall, if he's 29% 3-point shooter, if he makes a 3 on you, okay. At least we're solid. But you let them score and suddenly you're not in the foul game, which then means that Leicester can press. And they broke the press. But because Leicester, now when they broke the press, ordinarily, McGill got the ball and he got round, he beat the initial pressure. Now, ordinarily, at that point, Leicester would foul. You know, you try and steal it in the backcourt, but if you've got less than 24 seconds on the clock, then you're going to be fouling. But they didn't have to foul because of how quickly Crandall had scored.
Yeah.
And because they didn't have to foul, and because McGill's handling the basketball, and because there's a bit extra pressure, and because he's played 39 minutes and 46 seconds of the game, he dribbles out of bounds, goes behind his back, loses his
behind his back, lost the ball. That doesn't happen if Porter Button doesn't do that mind-bogglingly crazy sprinting around on 60 feet from the basket. Yeah.
You know, so what then happens? So every action has a reaction, and what then happens is they go to the Crandall Nelson Henry pick and roll game, which is what they're always going to go to. And if anybody pinches, you're going to rely on Johnson or Connor Washington or William Lee to shoot the ball. And Nelson Henry gets it, and Nelson Henry is the most efficient guy in the league, and he catches a basketball a different angle, but for him, not a difficult shot because he makes them.
Well, I mean, you say that.
No, it was a difficult
the way
shot,
he came back,
him,
it was,
it was a difficult shot. But for him, it's not a difficult shot because it's his shot. He can make those shots. His touch around the basket is such that it's not a shot you would give him, and he makes it. And
interesting, PJ had timeouts there. He chose to let it go.
Quite right.
We've had this discussion.
Leicester, you know, why would you take the ball out of McGill's hands? At that point, you know, take the ball out of McGill's hands so you can allow Leicester the opportunity to throw the ball to, you know, to pressure McGill when he's having the ball thrown to him. No, you go with your player, and McGill got a shot. But again, because they've been playing from behind the whole game, he'd not had any rest. And because Dusha was in foul trouble early, he'd had to play the whole first half. Well, he wouldn't have played the whole first half if Dusha hadn't been in the foul trouble. And so all these little things add to a tired player. And then, so he misses that shot. A tired player means legs aren't quite there. He got a decent look. He's knocked down that look before, but his legs weren't quite there and he missed it. And again, this is the desperation of playing for a championship against Plymouth, who aren't really desperate for this game. They'd like to win this game, but they're not desperate for it, if that makes any sense. And then you get to overtime, and I was a little bit surprised at Plymouth in overtime because they couldn't stop anything. And I think that the neighbour Hamilton front court wore down. I think PJ must have been thinking about putting Ocharobia back in, but they scored the first 6 points.
First five
points.
And then
they scored the first 5 points, and then you're kind of in a scoring race. But I thought Leicester must have scored 20 points or something close in overtime.
17, I think it was.
17 in 5 minutes. And I just thought Leicester got every shot they wanted in overtime, whilst Plymouth made some plays. They couldn't get a stop. And we've talked about before about the need to get stops at the end of games.
Interestingly, Neighbour hits a three. Again, it looked like Leicester were just going to sort of sneak away with it. Neighbour hits a three with 90 seconds to go to put Raiders back up. But then they come down court, and Washington, it was literally 7 or 8 seconds later, wide open three. And it's like,
well, at that point, you know that defensively they're tired.
Yeah,
and I think Dusha came back in the game. I think Porter Button sat down at some point from memory.
He did, he wasn't happy about it either.
No, he wasn't. Well, to be honest, he needs to look at the last 3 minutes and not be happy about them. And I think he is their kind of their bellwether for just how good they can be and whether they're going to get over the hump, because he has every physical talent going. He can shoot the ball, he can drive the basket, he can score, he can spin, he can, PJ trusts him enough to have him guard Crandall because of his length, because of his wingspan, because of his athleticism, but he has to lock in. He wasn't locked in for the final. He wasn't there at the trophy final. And as I say, 3 players in the last 3 minutes, everybody misses a foul shot, but you shouldn't be airballing 1 4 feet short. You can't be missing a layup with 3 minutes to go when you're thinking of something else. And you certainly cannot be doing what he did with Crandall. Anyway, that's a rant. Come on, Chris, prove me wrong. So I'm not surprised he came out, but it matters because you need to get McGill rest. It's like Fletcher. You can't keep playing these guys. Just because he's scored 36 through three quarters doesn't mean he's going to score 50. At some point in time, somebody else has to step up, and you can't keep going to the same well and expecting to get the same quality of water, or water as we call it.
Indeed.
And I think he still hasn't managed to solve the problem. He hasn't had to handle the problem yet of how to deal with eBay or Cherubia, Hamilton, and Neighbour when he's got all four of them.
Yeah.
And he went for a long time this week with Hamilton and Neighbour. I thought Hamilton was okay in this game, but I thought he was burnt out by the end. He certainly didn't really make any plays either offensively or defensively in overtime. And also he's undersized playing the 5. And that's what they play him as. And that is fine for maybe 15, 20 minutes a game, but that wears down if you're playing, 35, 36 minutes a game, and you're having to guard Nelson Henry or Ali Fraser, who are big bodies in the post. So Plymouth, not a great week for them, I think. But then again, it's probably good for them that they have a little dip, because they're going to need to pick it up again for the playoffs. And I did say last week, I didn't think they managed. Leicester, fantastic win, seen so many of them before. Ultimately, for all I'm complaining about the way Plymouth closed out the game, Leicester still had to make the plays.
Yeah.
I don't want to take away. And I thought, at halftime, I was a little bit fearful for Crandall because he wasn't right. He turned the ball over 3 or 4 times. They had a scheme against him. He wasn't shooting his release on his shot looked like it was hurting. From I might be entirely wrong about that, but it looked like it wasn't his natural release on his shot. And I thought, are we going to see a test? And I thought in the second half, he didn't come back in until about the 3-minute mark in the third quarter. I thought in the second half, he really asserted himself and took the challenge. So really impressed with that.
Yeah.
But he has the benefit, of course, of coming in after 7 minutes of the third quarter fresh, while Ricky McGill's been on the court for 7 minutes, battling Connor Washington.
McGill played 45 minutes and Gino played 30 minutes.
Yeah, and that so there is a benefit to that for him. But no, I mean it's a great luxury to have. I mean, if they win the league soon, which they'll hope to do, I imagine he'll not be playing the last couple of games.
It might. I would be really surprised because, as you say, you can see he had an extra strapping on and he ended up taking that off in the first half. But he did look, all the way through, he did look like I would imagine that the day after they win the league, they wrap him up and you don't see him again until the playoffs.
I have to think that when it comes to the playoffs, he'll be starting. I can't see him come off the bench coming to the playoffs. And that's kind of an interesting little thing they've got going on at the moment, whereby he's healthy. But, a guy like that, you really want him to start if you can. But
he had 15, 7, and 10. 10 assists.
He made the plays when it mattered. That's the biggest thing, and that was after, as I say, not a particularly auspicious start. Great win for Leicester. Credit to them. They ultimately they are, even in the games that they've lost at the end, they've kind of made the right plays.
Yeah,
a couple of times there've been a couple of little things which may have gone wrong for them.
Yeah,
but you don't often feel that they get ruffled at the end, which is why that missed Porter Bunton layup was so critical, because that takes it out to 6.
Even the missed free throw.
And that missed free throw, and that kind of sows the doubt. I mean, you get the impression, suddenly one bad shot and it can be an 8-point run out, and then everybody's looking around you and the game is gone. You have to sow that doubt into Leicester, because if you don't sow the doubt, if you give them a chance, you give a sucker an even break, to use a phrase, then they're going to take it. They're too good. They're too well drilled at the end of games.
McGill 16, 13, and 8 as well. Morsell led them with 20. 19 offensive rebounds, 15 second chance points. But the other interesting stat, Plymouth 20 turnovers, Leicester 23 points off turnovers.
I'm really interested to see what happens. I hope they play in the playoffs, because I want to see them going up against eBay. I want to see Crandall and Nelson Henry against McGill and eBay in the pick and roll. I really want to see that. I think that will be I feel cheated that we haven't seen it yet. I don't know whether he will make a significant difference, or whether Gino will bait him into foul trouble, or how they will defend it. But that's a shame.
Well, Plymouth officially out of the title race on that defeat. So it's down to Leicester and London. And speaking of London, we will go to Bristol, where the Lions were playing the Flyers, and it finished 84. Flyers scored the first. Unfortunately, because this the Leicester game went to overtime, I missed almost all of the first half of this, which is where the game was played. So I was quite frustrated to get back. It was almost in the books at the point I came back, because Fly scored the first 7 points. Walker then hits a couple of threes. Spencer Liggins hit threes. And then Lions just kept making three after three after three. And, they're 12 up midway through the second quarter, and they're not a team you can really chase down. Yeah, certainly not Bristol, the way the Bristol score are going to chase down.
Well, Bristol, again, they missed. I mean, I happened to watch it from probably late on in the first quarter, so I've got a little bit over you. They missed so many chippies. They missed so many layups. If you, I actually went and checked the stats at half time to see what the bigs were shooting, and it was something like 3 of 16. That's Delpesh, Baker, and Edozie. And the reason I did that was because they were layups. They were 4 feet shots. And it's just hard to watch at times, because there's not much wrong with their offense and getting the ball to where it needs to go. But these guys just aren't finishing. And then in the second half, it kind of, it became a little bit of I'm watching Edozie chuck up like 18-foot jump shots and thinking, well, if I'm coaching the opposition, I'm quite happy with you shooting an 18-foot jump shot. You might shoot 35%, 40% on them, but that's still better than Teddy shooting up a 3, and they're breaking them. And again, he's constantly, it appears to me, having to shuttle between his forward lineups to find something. And Rogers probably struggles. Is probably the shooting the ball best at the moment, but he struggles a little bit defensively. Let's say Edozie probably gives them the most defensively and physically. Delpesh is probably the best scorer, albeit he scores in various different ways. He posts up at times, at other times he steps out, there's other time he rolls on the screen, so you never necessarily get anything consistent. Baker hasn't really found a role yet, and Lockett is looking for space to attack in. And Lockett wants to play in transition, but none of the others really do. Teddy and Josh aren't really that bothered about playing in transition, because that's not their game. So it was a little bit, it was difficult to watch. And because London, other than, as you say, the second half was mildly disinteresting, other than for a lovely kind of a spot about 5 minutes through the third quarter, where Liggins committed a foul in the post, and Keith got him from the media unsportsmanlike on the second foul, and then he skulked off to the corner sulking. When Vince took him out and kind of sat on that one, because they've only got small benches there. He sat behind the basket, And I was interested to watch that. But to be fair, when Vince brought him back in and he finished off the game the way he was meant to, the aside is this Kevin Ware thing is not good. I don't know what is going on. I'm going to be, and this is my opinion. Obviously, you work for who you work for, but if he is not there, and he's not there, he's been part of the team all season. If he's not playing with them anymore because he's injured, they should be saying he's injured. If he's not with them anymore because he's been released, they should be saying he's been released. The fans of the team deserve to know. In the league, it should be mandated, I think, that if there are significant personnel changes, if registrations are released or whatever, and it should be announced. There should be listed on a website somewhere as to who's playing with who. I don't think it reflects very well on anybody.
No.
That a player with his significance to that team has just basically fallen off the face of the earth. And no one's said anything about it. So please, come on, Lions press team, tell us what's going on. No harm. No one's gonna. No, it's not like there's going to be a.
Well, exactly.
No harm about it. You've released him. You've released him.
And if he's not gone, then
of course it's difficult to go
gone.
in the middle of a pandemic. But if you've gone and you're sitting in your palatial apartment in London, paid for by Miami brokers, that's fine. Let us know. Just tell us. So I think that should be clarified, because it's changed the dynamic of their team quite significantly. Spencer's now starting. And I imagine Vince is trying to get him ready for the playoffs, but he's not convincing me at the moment. Then you've got suddenly we've seen Lockhart come back. And he'd been in Wes' penthouse for the past 3 months, I think, because he hadn't been playing. and so that's changed. Lucas made an appearance a couple of games ago and made some shots, but that, isn't around for much. It hasn't been playing much again. Daniel Kojo just comes in, plays hard, makes shots. But it would be nice to know what's going on. So a good win for London. And to be honest, that's what's separating those two games against Bristol, London and Plymouth this week are what is separating London and Plymouth, and obviously Leicester, from what's happened to Newcastle and the other teams. Because Newcastle lost 2 games to Surrey and Manchester, who aren't in the playoffs at the moment, whereas London and Plymouth have both handled Bristol, who are 8th in the playoffs at the moment, who are just as desperate for wins. So teams are going to be looking out now for that 5th spot, because the blood is in the water for Newcastle in relation to the 4th spot, because they're looking, they're thinking this is a beatable team.
Everybody except Parker scored for the Lions. He only played 10 minutes, to be fair. Let's move on to it was a 15-4 finish to the end of the game as well, by the way. So that's why it
made it close. Yeah, it wasn't close. I didn't watch that.
73-84, but if you didn't see the game, it wasn't close. So Sunday's games now. Surrey Scorchers 85. Worcester Wolves 75. Wolves would have actually qualified themselves and Newcastle if they'd won this game, but Surrey with an important win for them in terms of their playoff chances. Surrey got an early lead, but 9 in a row for the Wolves put them 20-7 up, and in that run Connor Cashaw twisted an ankle, it looked like, on the thing, and didn't come back in, and that's a big loss for Surrey in that situation.
Well, it is, because he's only just got back. He's not been back that long, probably 3 or 4 weeks, fully healthy. But they do have depth. It's just a question as to whether the depth is quite as good as what Cashaw brings. I feel like I've watched Worcester play basketball every day for a month. I just every time we turn a BBL game on, Worcester's playing a game. I love Matt Newby's stuff, but it's getting, it's beginning to permeate my non-thinking moments. I'm going to be thinking about the cross. Waking up in the middle of the night, thinking about the cross stream for Jordan Williams, and they just and it's the same guys playing the same way, doing the same things, and being efficient. But eventually, if I'm wearing down just watching it, what must it be like for the players who are having to play? Eventually, I thought this game was a relatively close game. It was Lacey James played well. He was aggressive for Surrey early, playing the 5 spot. Teo was playing the 4 spot. Jordan Williams took advantage of Teo at the 4 spot with his size. Lacey James was effective at the 5 spot with his quickness. That was only the trade-off. And then it kind of went back and forward. They couldn't really stop Hicks. That was the problem during the game. Whenever Surrey needed a basket, Hicks was able to get to his little floater game, and that really helped them. But ultimately, the game came down to the last 2 minutes. The benches played each other quite well. McSwiggan made some shots for Worcester. Burns helped them as well. But it came down to the last 2 minutes. And
it came down to the last minute, really. I mean, it was a one-shot game, and then Hildreth gets fouled on the 3. Well, that was the question. That was going to be my question. What did you make of that call where Hildreth shot a 3 and got fouled?
I understand why the ref called it. I understand why Rob Hickman called it. But I had to watch it back. It's one of those ones where you have to watch it back. But obviously the giveaway was Kimball's look when it was called. But what happened was, as a player, as a defender, you were not allowed to go under and into the landing space of a shooter. Everybody accepts that understands that. And from Rob Hickman's angle, and I think that's what he thought happened, because there was no contact up top that I could see. Nothing. I couldn't see anything, nothing on the arm, nothing on the body. But what actually happened was when you slowed it down, Kimball actually went to the side of Hildreth. Hildreth had kind of turned his body to shoot the ball. He was shooting it with the Kevin Durant way, with his feet at like 10 o'clock. And Kimball kind of went across him to the side. Hildreth fell down. And if Hildreth had been in the shooting motion whereby he actually brings his left foot forwards as he shoots it, there's an argument that would have been the space he was landing. But Hildreth actually landed in the same place that he took up from. And Kimball was not in that space. So he was off balance because he fell over because it was a heave. It wasn't a shot.
Because it was the last second of the shot clock.
33-foot heave from the last second of the shot clock. That's why he fell over. And he was off balance shooting it as a result.
Yeah.
So, I think Worcester got hard done by on that. I understand why it was called, and maybe not the smartest challenge, given that it's the last second of the shot clock and it's a 33-foot heave. So you gave the referee a decision to make. But looking at it, watching it and the camera at Surrey so close, obviously, he landed sideways to him. He didn't go at him and didn't land in his landing spot at all. So tough. Hildreth, to be fair, for a 50% 3-point shooter foul shooter, goes and knocks down all three. Yeah. And kind of at that point, that's really the game. That shot is the game. Yeah. Because Worcester missed a few threes on the other end, but their legs, they play Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, 2 o'clock Sunday as well. Wednesday, Friday, 2 o'clock on Sunday. Thank you, sorry. 2 o'clock games, not in London, or not my
No.
I don't think the league should allow them, but there we go. 3 o'clock in Plymouth is dubious. 2 o'clock in Guildford is painful. Yeah,
it's not as far from Worcester, to be fair, but
it's not as far from Worcester. But even so, it's not a time you used to play in 2 o'clock. No, it's it's different. Your whole routine.
Sorry,
is different. Anyway, rant over.
So Hicks 18 and 10. Walsh with his best in the BBL of 16 points. He basically finished it off with the score and a steal, and then
he played Cashaw's minutes in the second half, so he got to play more. So credit to him for stepping up when he got the opportunity to play more.
So let's go on to Glasgow versus Cheshire. The Rocks 77 and the Knicks 84. Carey and Gordon back into the starting five, and it was Lull and McCall off the bench this time. They also had Sol Rolls Tyson, who got onto court for the first time since December. He suited up the last couple of games, but he hasn't played. Murray with 3 early threes. They get out to a 15-7 lead, and really the difference in the first half of this game was Rocks 8 of 12 from 3-point line. Knicks 1 of 15 from the 3-point line.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a dangerous situation for the Rocks because, as I said in the last game of the Plymouth game, and indeed the Manchester game with Newcastle, teams are rarely going to shoot 2 of 28, but the defenders may start defending them as if they are going to shoot 2 of 28, and that's the problem. I thought actually the Rocks came out flying. Jack Dommy's flying around and making plays. Gareth draining shots from everywhere. They are a dangerous shooting team. I thought the last 2 minutes of the first half, they blew the game, to be honest. I thought the ball was flying around everywhere. They lost their composure. They turned it over. And they gave, I think, Cheshire, who at that point maybe only had 24, 26 points. They gave them...
It was 39-24 with 2.5 minutes to go.
Yeah, well, they gave... that's not bad. I'm glad. I'm quite impressed with my memory for that. Even though it was only about an hour and a half ago. And they blew it. And it wasn't that they blew it because all they had to do was finish off that half solid. And they didn't. They turned the ball over. They fouled shooters. They chucked up bad shots. And I think by, what was it, 6-point game at halftime?
8-point game at halftime.
8-point game at halftime. So 15 becomes 8. But the manner in which it happened was disappointing for me. I thought, they blew a lot of hard work in that time. Cheshire, again, this is the point I make about not quite knowing if they know what their best lineup is. They're mixing and matching a lot. And trying to figure it all out. And it's never, it's one thing to match up with the opposition in game by game, that's fine, but your guys really want to know what their role is going to be and how it's going to be and have that little degree of consistency about it when you get into this late in the season. So obviously there might be injuries, there might be all sorts of stuff going on that I don't know about, but I think they'll be looking to get some consistency relatively soon as the season finishes for the playoffs.
So having had that good finish to the first half, the Knicks then scored the first 10 points of the third quarter and took the lead. Murray hits a couple of threes and rights the ship, puts Glasgow back in front. But then at the end of the quarter, McCall hit a couple and Kyle Carey hit a 3 as well. And the Knicks had a small lead going into the fourth quarter. And it was actually not until 6.5 minutes to go that they managed to finally shake the Rocks off. It was 70-69 with 6:30 to go, and then Carey and McCall dragged them away.
Mark and Kieran actually mentioned on commentary that the Glasgow, I think, or the Glasgow and Cheshire were the worst teams for defending the 3-point line. And it's a long trip from Cheshire up to Glasgow. So yeah, they miss in the first half, but they're not going to keep missing, and that aggression, and no doubt the coach getting into them at half time made a difference at the beginning of the third quarter, and that's why the end of the second quarter was so important. And if they finish up 15 up, then okay, they go on a 6-point run, 7-point run, you call a timeout, you refocus your guys, and you still got a foothold in the game. I thought a couple of things about this. They played with them. I mean, Glasgow basically played them toe to toe for, as you say, about 34 minutes. But two things I thought happened at the end of the game. Firstly, I was surprised that Brandon wasn't on the court. He finished off the game with Quady and Malcolm, Murray, Bunyan, and Jack Domney. Now, Jack Domney wore down exactly the same as last week. About 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, he was done. He wore down. Suddenly, the shots he was making, the energy he was playing with, he was posting up low and he wasn't getting anything, and he was, he was turning the ball over. So he needed a blow. They probably couldn't afford to give him one because of all the size. So that was one thing. But the unit that they had on the court at the end, that unit, Bunyan, Murray, Malcolm, Quady, and Jack Domney, very little foot speed. The two quickest guys on that Rocks team are getting to the basket, Brandon and Van Sowers. And they weren't there. And I thought their offense basically struggled because Jack Domney wasn't finishing because he was tired, and everybody else was basically shooting threes. And eventually those threes don't go in. So I was surprised Brandon didn't come back on the court. He had an effective game getting to the rim. I was very surprised, that he's almost like at the moment they've got a system whereby the starting five play the first quarter, and then those two guys come in for the second quarter. And I think it let them down today. Obviously, for their perspective, they're not in the playoffs, so you're finding out about players, you're finding out what they can do. Cheshire got away with one, insofar as they weren't at the races in the first half, but they're still going to be a difficult team to beat over two legs, because they've got enough scoring and enough big game ability to scare anybody who is playing against them.
Indeed, they've already beaten the top two, as it'll probably end up being in the league standings. They had a 13-0 run next, just to seal it. 82-70 they led it.
And it was because up until that point they were trading, and Glasgow were in the basketball game. But when the penetration stopped, when Jack Domney got tired, it becomes a question of hoping that Garrett's going to bail you out, and he'd already made 6 threes. There's only so many times that he's going to bail you out. One thing I will say, my pet frustration of watching all these games this week has been the amount of times that people are guarding shooters, got them trapped in the corner, and they are shooters, and they've got their hand up here, and for some reason they let them shoot the basketball. When you're actually giving up threes to shooters who are shooting them, who are not open because you're guarding them properly, and you're still giving up shots because you don't realize that that's a shot they can make. That happened with Gareth Murray a number of times in that game. It happened in Newcastle on Friday night. It's happened. There was another game I watched as well where Bristol, and obviously it happened at Bristol, and it happens every week with Connor. It's just a frustration to me that you have to know the people you are guarding. And you have to know that if Gareth Murray gets the ball in the corner, and if you're just squaring Gareth Murray up in the corner, he is shooting it. And he's going to make it. And you might think, that's good D. What can I do? No, you've got to stop him. You've got to get on top of him, on his top side. You've got to make him dribble the ball. You've got to take him out of that comfort zone. And some of those guys, it's frustrating to me watching it. Thinking, and it's also frustrating to me that I've got to the point now where I'm not actually watching the games, enjoying them.
You've got to
enjoying the good play. So Gino Crandall goes, 60 feet in 3 dribbles in 3 seconds to bring Leicester back in the basketball game. All I'm thinking about is what the hell is Chris Porter doing? And that is, I think, a poisonous mindset, which in hopefully 4 weeks at the end of this, I'm going to be aware of, and I can get back to enjoying it again.
I will try and bring some yin to your yang in that. Just to finish off on this game, we talked about the shooting at halftime, 3-point shooting. Second half, they shot almost identical numbers of 3-pointers. 3 of 11 Glasgow in the second half, 7 of 15 Cheshire in the second half, which just shows you how it switched back. Regression to the mean in both in both cases.
Indeed. And can I just say for posterity, it is April the 11th, it's 6 o'clock, and it is snowing in Gateshead.
There you go.
Sorry, hang on, man. Yeah, crazy. Sorry, I was listening to the stuff about the regression to the mean, but even so,
there we
snowing,
go.
for Christ's sake.
So let's finish off with the last game on Sunday evening. The Manchester Giants 77, the Sheffield Sharks 58. Big win for the Giants as they still keep tracking down that last playoff place. It started out well for the Sharks. Rutino hitting threes early on. They led 11-6, but Giants had a 9-3 finish to the first quarter and took a 4-point lead into the second, and actually were pretty comfortable in that first half.
Yeah, and big player for Sheffield, Kipper Nichols. I always say it's stretch 4. He opens the court out for everybody else. And they had 11 points after 5 minutes. He got 2 fouls. He was sat the whole of the rest of the first half, which I thought was dubious. I think I'd have brought him back. And they scored 19 points in the last 15 minutes of the first half. And I think they scored 2 points or 3 points in the end of the first quarter. And it's primarily, there's no secret to it. It's all about the spacing. It's difficult to play Marsden and Cook at the same time. They really struggle with that. And you ended up with Campbell coming on and being like the fourth guard in the game as well to try and give them that spacing. So, it's difficult when you've got a guy on 2 fouls in the first half and you're sitting down for the whole half. It can then take him 6 or 7 minutes in the third quarter to get going, and you can lose. And you're minimizing the amount of minutes he can play at 20. You're maximizing the minutes he can play at 25. So I think I would have brought him back to see if we could have got him going in the first half. Didn't do that. Trusted the rest of the guys. They kind of hung around. Manchester have cleaned up all the nonsense. They've cleaned up all their transition D and their kind of pouting and all the kind of twistiness, which was losing them points and meaning that they couldn't sustain runs in games. That's probably been helped by the fact they've got less players and they're more focused. And probably some of the players who aren't playing, Jack Hudson accepted. So some of the ones who've gone home were the ones who were primarily responsible for said pouting and complaining. So they're a more coherent and cohesive unit. And they kind of just made, the first half was about them finding their way in the game and making enough plays to keep going. Now, as you say, the second half, weird, really, game just died away.
Yeah, it was one of them where they got 10 up, Manchester, and then Sheffield cut it to 4, and you thought, well, will they be a bit wobbly, Manchester? But Whelan hits that 3 late in the third quarter, and then in the fourth quarter, Johnson and Whelan were hitting from behind the arc, and at the other end of the floor at the same time, Sheffield had some really good looks, like wide open shots for shooters you'd want to be taking them, and just everything was short.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. It's another little tweak that they've got, the Sheffield. Like they start with Tuck in the first half, and they always tend to start with Coke in the second half. And I only think that's to try and keep Coke out of early foul trouble. And in the second half, for a period of time, he was effective going against Ulf because Ulf's a little bit smaller than him, and he was able to get some hook shots going and kind of get them in the game. Yeah. But as I've said before, you start feeding a big man religiously, and that can take you take your shooters out of the rhythm that they're in, and so they don't get quite as many touches. And look, I mean, I don't know what the offensive rebounding was in this game, but Ulf, I thought, we've had Ubiaro as kind of the most improved player of the year for basically all season at Plymouth, but Ulf is coming very, very close because he's cleaned up so much of the negatives to his game. He's finishing better, his rebounding, the amount of extra possessions he gets, which results in threes, the fact that he does all that work, and his defense on the screen and roll, being in the right place really made a difference in that game.
Even when he's undersized, he does a good job at it. I mean, Cook hit some hook shots over him, but he can't do much about that. But he made it hard for him.
That's his only weakness. That's the only point you would say we could actually go at him. Is you can throw the ball in on the post against him and see if somebody who's long and skillful can make a shot on him, because he struggles with that. But even then, a couple of times he got in front of the post and stole the basketball. And at the moment, it's a positive thing. It's the bucket of water. You take the hand out and you take something out of the bucket of water. The bucket of water still looks the same. And in Brady, left, really was monopolising touches, monopolising rebounds, pulling up double doubles. But for the purposes of the team, having Ulf there, there's no drop off. And he's very different, very effective. He doesn't necessarily put up the numbers, but he doesn't demand the basketball. He's not a dominant personality on the team, and that lets the other guys, brings the other guys out and allows them to be it. So it's the type of guy that everybody would want to play with. So credit to him.
Yeah, he's a great teammate.
Yeah, great.
You'd love to play with him.
And in the as you say, in the fourth quarter, Sheffield kind of disappointed me a little bit because you were waiting for one of those guys to step up and say, "Look, it's me." Nichols made a couple of shots at the end of the third quarter, and you're waiting for either Helmsley, or Ritino or somebody just say, or Lillard. Lillard's probably the one with the personality to do it, to kind of clear people out of the way and say, "Look, we need a bucket. I'm going to go and get one." And they didn't. And this is the thing about Helmsley. He remains the quietest 17-point a game scorer in the league because he gets them, but you want to see him in the fourth quarter of a game like that on the road take it over. Now against that, Manchester need to win the game. Sheffield probably don't need to win the game. And if Sheffield are coming off a BBL bounce back 30-point win, so so that may have an impact as well. But it's kind of concerning for Sheffield. It does appear that they can be shut down a little bit, and they're a little bit schizophrenic in the way they play. Sometimes it's in the post, sometimes it's two bigs, sometimes it's all the shooters on the court and the driving kick. And I still think it all comes down to Kipper Nichols. If Kipper Nichols plays, they are a very tough team to guard. If he scores and he's effective, if he doesn't and he's not effective and they can't get him in the game, then they become, as a team, much easier to guard.
Whelan 18, Johnson 18, 4 of 5, Satchel 18 and 13, Ulf 13 and 12. Good performances.
Satchel should have got 4 points for some of his shots.
Indeed.
Seriously, if there's a bad shot maker in this league, probably Cassell's probably the next one. Actually, the capability of making bad shots, it's him. And obviously, if you can make them, they're not bad shots anymore. But yeah, he played really well. He was very quiet on Friday night and did really well. But Ulf is a difference maker at the moment in that team. They're different when he's not on the court. That's incredible credit to him, the step up he's made.
Sheffield finished 7 of 28 from the 3-point line, which, given the ones they made early, tells you how poor they were late on. Let's have a quick look at the table on the way out here. Obviously at the top, Leicester a couple of games away from the title now, or they just need to beat London is the other alternative.
It would be fun if they have to beat London to win the league. That would be interesting. If London win out until next week and Leicester beat Newcastle, and then Leicester actually have to go win the league against London. They wouldn't have to win it then.
They wouldn't have to, but they would.
It would be interesting to see whether London would be how London
attack that game.
Because you don't want to be the team that wins the league. That's on the other side. That would be very interesting.
Plymouth 16 and 9, so 2 losses back of London. Newcastle 15 and 10, but as we talked about earlier, sort of trending in the wrong direction at the moment. Then after that, in the bottom half of the playoffs, Cheshire 13 and 13, Worcester 13 and 15, Sheffield now 12 and 13, Bristol 10 and 15, and that's the last playoff place. And then just outside the playoff places, you got Surrey now just half a game back of Bristol. They've got 9 wins from 24 games. So if they win their game in hand, they'll have the same record. And Manchester also have 9 wins, but they played 2 more games, so they've got 17 defeats. So it looked very improbable for Manchester, but now it's not beyond the realms of possibility. And you look at their schedule, it's not out of reach. And their big game against London last weekend of the season, London might have nothing to play for.
It might be, 12 wins, even 12 wins could feasibly get them in. If I'm Leicester, I'm not wanting to play Manchester. I think I would be quite happy playing one of the other two. I'd be quite happy playing Manchester as well with the team Leicester's got. But I think Manchester are a team that's trending in the right direction, and might just go in there with a bit of irrational confidence. But so they've got, they have to have a shot. I don't see Bristol putting the run together. I see them winning games, but I don't see them putting the run together. I don't necessarily see Surrey I think Surrey have to play London this week as well. which is a struggle for them. So no, I think Manchester have a real shot. I think 12. I don't know that we have to have a look at the head-to-head. I'm sure you'll know them better than me. But 12 wins will probably be head-to-head. 13 wins should get you in.
Yeah. But all to play for, and as I say, a couple of weeks ago we weren't giving them much of a shot. So credit to Lloyd Gardner, the way he's turned that team around and got them going in the right direction.
Yeah.
It might be too late, but even if it is, it's still quite an impressive finish. So we will leave it there, and we will look forward to next Sunday night and another week's action of British basketball. A lot of basketball. I managed to consume it all in real time this week. I didn't have to watch any of it back, so that was a bonus.
Well, I had to get the Worcester Friday night game back because I was at Newcastle.
Right.
The Worcester Wednesday night game back because I was watching Leicester. Sorry, one of them had to watch one of them back.
Yeah.
Worcester, Cheshire, had to watch that.
It's your favourite team, though, Worcester, as we've established.
That's why I felt it. That's why I probably impinged on my psyche, thinking about the fact that I was actually watching them in not real time. That probably hurt even more. Bless you, Marty, doing a great job. Stick at it. Don't take it personally. But oh dear.
Right, we'll leave it there, and have a great week, everybody, and thanks for listening. We'll be back next Sunday night. Goodbye.
Thanks, guys.